Hello, crew. Here I am in Seattle. Seattle is a great book town, a great coffee town, and a great seafood town. And those are like three of my favorite things in the world. So I love Seattle. Unfortunately, it's like super expensive to live here. But anyway, I've been trying to find some time since I went to Shakespeare's first folio celebration at WashU last week because I learned some interesting things or gained some interesting perspectives that I wanted to share with you. The first one I wanted to share has specifically to do with the Winter's Tale, and obviously, since we've been studying that this session, I thought that was particularly apropos. And that was in a paper presented by a scholar named Claire Summers, who's a lecturer in early modern literature at WashU. And again, she spoke about the Winter's Tale, and she talked about the print references in the Winter's Tale, which, quite frankly, I've never paid much attention to. But let me kind of back up a little bit. So her kind of working premise was that the chronology was that the theaters in London were closed from about 1609 to 1610 because of a really bad outbreak of the plague. So there was about a year there where Shakespeare's company couldn't perform, or at least couldn't perform much. They could maybe go away and perform somewhere, but not in their normal venues there. And as we know, when he came back from that sort of layoff, that plague vacation, he produced The Winter's Tale and The Tempest. And I've talked about the context of how those were so kind of risk-taking and out there. But Claire also suggests that, and again, if we combine this with Emma Watson's research that says that by that point in his career, Shakespeare's popularity was definitely, waning, that maybe during that time he started thinking seriously about leaving the theater, and he started thinking about his legacy. And to that point, Shakespeare had had a few inexpensive quarto editions of a few plays and some of his poems published, but not the bulk of his writing had been published at that point, and certainly not in any way that presented it in kind of a serious fashion. And so she suggests that he was starting to think of a collected works like the First Folio towards the end of his career, and kind of shifting his perspective from being someone who is writing for the stage, which basically once it's performed, it just kind of goes away in time, right? It isn't like today where we have videotape and can make films, and a performance can last indefinitely. The only way for work to last was to be in published form, and preferably in a published form that was substantial enough that it was going to stand the rigors of time, right? So she claims that that emphasis in his mind from writing for the stage solely for writing for print and for his legacy, we can see manifested in The Winter's Tale in all of the references, the metaphoric references, particularly to print and book-related kinds of things. And I wasn't able to prepare for this little talk as much as I might, but if you go to The Winter's Tale, find a PDF version online or something, and you search for print, you'll see all the different references there are to print in The Winter's Tale. And then there are other references related to books besides the word print. So again, Claire Summers is suggesting that producing a book of some sort was very much on his mind, and that leaches through in his imagination to talking about books and print culture in The Winter's Tale in a way that he hadn't in previous plays. I would add to Claire's thesis that if we look at The Tempest and we look at the importance of Prospero's library and the books he uses, which are the source of his magic, which he uses to win the day, so to speak, that also would fit into that thesis of suggesting that in Shakespeare's final works, he was thinking about a major book project, and that comes through in his writing. Now, unfortunately, he died almost as soon as he went back to Stratford, and he wasn't able to, make that collected works happen. But he had friends who were able to do that. And then, as we know, the collected works, the first folio came out about 7 years after, not about, but 7 years after Shakespeare's death in 1623. So I thought that was very interesting. There was another gentleman that gave a talk, didn't talk so much about the first folio exactly. Joe Lowenstein, I believe is the professor's name. And he talked about, among other things, the fact that Shakespeare was 30 before he really got into writing for the theater in any kind of meaningful way. But up until age 30, he kind of kicked around and didn't have much direction. Seemed like, again, we don't have a lot on his biography, but it seemed as if perhaps he went to London, maybe looking for work, and kind of fell in with some actors and realized he had kind of a thing for it, an interest in it, a talent for it, something like that. And that eventually led to, all that we know happened after that. But Lowenstein's main point was to think about that fact that when Shakespeare was 30, he had no idea what lay before him. Maybe he was sort of cocksure and maybe a little arrogant. We don't know, but maybe he had confidence and thought he was destined for great things, but he couldn't possibly know that for sure. And so I think that's really important for us as writers, because no matter where we're at in our life, in our chronology, great things could still be ahead. And I've been thinking about that ever since Joe's talk last week. And like, for example, my own beloved William Gass didn't really start writing fiction seriously till his 40s. Certainly didn't get anything published until he was in his 40s. His magnum opus, The Tunnel, he didn't finish until age 70. It ended up winning the American Book Award when he was 72, I believe. His next novel, Middle Sea, didn't come out until 2013. He was well into his 80s by then. And then it eventually won the William Dean Howells Medal, which is a very prestigious award. And I think Gass was around 90 when he won that award. I remember hearing about or watching a documentary on Laura Ingalls Wilder, of course, who we know from the Little House series. Well, she didn't begin writing anything until she was in her 40s. And she didn't try to write her first novel until she was in her 60s. And yet she ended up having this amazing fame after that point. And I'm sure we can all think of similar kinds of examples. So no matter where we're at in our life, in our writing career, just like Shakespeare, the best may yet lay ahead. So I think that's important to keep in mind. All right, I didn't want to make this video too long. I've got to get myself together. Going to do a little bit of Seattle sightseeing, but I got to head out of town for a little drive after that. So anyway, I'll catch up with you all when I get back to my roost. Meanwhile, I'll kind of check in on you from the road, so to speak. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them.